I think this is pretty interesting. You gotta check this out. Granted,
Jaegers made themselves present in.
I would love to see a Pacific Rim versus Shin Gojira. That'd be a pretty fucking awesome movie if they do that shit right. But that's beside the point. We watching Jaegers versus the Monsterverse Titans.
The Monsterverse. In this episode, we will analyze different scenarios where these giant mechs dared to wage war against these types of kaiju. But not just any monsters. Today, we will feature not just one, but 3 different titans. Kong, the G-Man, and Mecha Godzilla. All with...
Oh yeah, apparently there was a second Pacific Rim movie I didn't even know about. Was it any good? Anybody, like, somebody in the comments say something, because I don't know. I want to see the first movie again. I might fucking do that shit.
Different combat philosophies, weapons, and objectives that would make each scenario unique. If this is your first time here, please remember to follow or subscribe to our channel to be the first to see epic kaiju fight content. Coming up, Pacific Rim Jaegers in the Monsterverse. Before we start, we want to quickly show you another way
I gotta get sponsored blocked.
Game the thousands eating the almost strong new bad rate is running for everyone. New players can appear in some Jaeger action. Before we throw our Jaegers against our Monsterverse kaiju, we need to first understand what these things really are, why they were built, and how they physically compare against Monsterverse Titans. These mechanized giants are featured in Pacific Rim. In this cinematic universe, Earth is attacked from within by super...
What would the Avas do against kaiju? Or these creatures, these titans? Would the Avas be able to fight Godzilla? I mean, I know the creator of Evangelion created Shin Gojira, so he might... I don't think he would, but that'd be cool if he did have a fucking Evangelion versus Godzilla.
Intelligent alien
That'd be funny.
That unleash massive sea
well, not funny, probably be fucking terrifying, but you get the point.
Areas. After seeing that nuking these creatures only led to self-destruction, the United Nations greenlighted an initiative to build massive human-shaped mechs, which would leverage human mobility, dexterity, and intelligence, and amplify these abilities on a larger scale, enough to fight monsters in hand-to-hand combat. By fighting them in this manner, humanity would no longer have to use nukes and destroy their own cities. Building these could come at a massive cost, however. For example, just one of these could cost up to $100 billion, and some are rumored to cost a lot more. But how big are these compared to Monsterverse kaiju? These Jaegers varied in size from 230 to up to 280 feet in height. In terms of weight, these were a lot lighter than anticipated. Now, admittedly, the official weights for these Jaegers are all over the place. Some ranging
as long as they ain't building that shit with aluminum.
2,000 tons to up
be
to
fucked.
7,000 tons.
You going out the war with some weak ass shit like that.
As realistic as possible in this video, we will align with the higher end figures provided. By comparing the physical proportions of an average Jaeger to our Monsterverse opponents, we have a massive gap in terms of weight and height, meaning that it would be illogical for a single Jaeger to successfully defeat any of these 3 titans with ease. All 3 of these titans, especially Mecha Godzilla, would have a massive height advantage over any of these Jaegers.
Anybody who's smart, because this isn't just, this ain't like UFC or nothing. It's like planned attack all out war. You will want to send a team regardless. I'm not throwing one Jaeger against any fucking kaiju. I'll at least have 2. It might cost more money, but it'll guarantee the victory.
Not to mention that a single swipe of these extremely heavy kaiju would pack enough force to destroy a Jaeger with a single hit, especially since all of these kaiju here have some serious upper body strength. The only way to make these scenarios at all interesting will be by assigning a number of Jaegers to take on these kaiju.
When you said upper body strength, why did I just imagine Godzilla doing pull-ups?
Not a 1v1
You
match,
know I'm
but a
tired.
squad of these to carry on an assault against our Monsterverse contestants. Now that we have a clearer picture of how these Jaegers could perform, let us now start analyzing our first battle scenario. Number 1, Jaegers versus Kong. We will begin with a kaiju whose best strengths include high problem-solving skills, high dexterity, mobility, and weapon-wielding capabilities. Defeating a titan such as this will require immense upper body strength, and definitely handheld weapons that can counter its own. Fortunately for the Jaeger program, it has a plethora of mechs with different types of handheld weapons that could possibly aid in inflicting damage to Kong. By housing humans inside a mech, this will allow these pilots to literally know what it would feel like to fight Kong, just as if they were fighting another human.
Yeah,
Except
and
Kong
wait,
is far superior.
how?
Compared to an average Jaeger build, Kong is much more robust, wider, and not only that, he has proven to be one of the most intelligent titans in the Monsterverse. In terms of combat ability, almost as intelligent as a human. Knowing this, we can rule out the possibility of a single Jaeger defeating Kong. We will need a lot more. For this specific fight, we think the most important factors to consider is 1, dexterity, 2, mobility, and 3, intelligence. In terms of dexterity, both humans and Kong will be able to wield handheld weapons. Kong just happens to be a master at this sort of thing. Once vastly outnumbered, an intelligent titan like Kong would quickly look for anything that would give him the edge before he engages in close combat. Anything, such as his axe for instance, would immediately give Kong the edge in handheld weapons.
See, what they're doing is they're comparing weapon strength. You don't need to have a super strong weapon. As long as it can cut whatever it is that you're trying to cut, it's useful. You have 4 Jaegers here, right? You have a Kong that's in the air. You don't have mobility once you're in the air. Once you're in the air, where you're going to land is where you're going to land. You're telling me, because y'all seen earlier where one of those Jaegers had like a whip, like right here. Yeah, he had a fucking whip, an electric whip. I would assume that has the ability to tase. So if he's in the air, one of them can get the whip, control the arm that has the axe in hand, while the rest pull out their stabbing weapons. So while one of them is subduing Kong with the electric whip, the others could counteract with whatever they had. One of them had like a cannon, an arm cannon. I don't think that Kong is just going to wash the Jaegers the way this guy says that he will.
That could successfully counter this axe. This weapon alone is estimated to be approximately 207 feet in length, more than 2/3 the length of the largest Jaegers. Imagine someone hurling an extremely heavy axe at you.
Well, yeah, if they're hurling a axe at you, the only part that's going to do major damage is the head of the axe. So as long as they don't get a full head start swing on you, you got to move in and control it. Control his arm. Control the weapon hand. Now, if you have a longer range weapon like a fucking whip or, you know, a cannon, the axe isn't going to matter at that point. You can step out the way and utilize that to your advantage. That if they could pull that off, that's still a victory. It won't be super easy, but it'll be a tactic.
The results would be catastrophic. This weapon, with these swing speeds, would be able to send a single Jaeger flying or potentially cut it in half. Dispatching
if they stay in there, yeah.
in this form would only mean that Kong would quickly be able to render down a squadron of Jaegers to half their number. In order to defeat Kong, the remaining Jaegers would have to resort to their numbers and strategy.
Well, not only that, but they're all skilled combatants, military combatants that train like on a consistent basis. I at least remember from the first movie all the training that they was doing. Just to be able to even pilot a Jaeger, you have to be in tip-top physical and mental condition. Plus, it's like 2 minds in one, piloting one machine. So you got Kong versus 2 trained combatants combining their mental abilities and their fighting skills together at, you know, peak physical condition. in a robot suit that enhances their abilities, and you got 4 of them. Like I said, I don't think it's just going to be a wash.
One thing that Kong has a serious advantage over the Jaegers in is mobility. Now, it's important to note that not all of these are created equal. Some Jaegers, such as the Mark VI seen in Pacific Rim Uprising, were a lot more agile than its predecessors. But compared to Kong, these pale in comparison.
Well, yeah,
Jaegers
because
do not
Kong
have a
has
leap
natural
ability
movement.
like Kong does, meaning that in terms of movement, Kong would easily be able to pick these off one by flanking them and taking them out on their weaker sides. The only
Okay, how fast can they turn around? Unless he's one swiping them, which we just saw this Jaeger right here. Was it the orange
not all
one?
of these are created equal. Some Jaegers, such as the Mark VI seen in Pacific Rim Uprising, were a lot more
Yeah, he's attacking. This creature right here is trying to jump behind him, and he's attacking. He's literally cutting it from the air,
agile than its predecessor.
and he didn't have to move much. It's not a crazy movement.
But compared to Kong, these pale in comparison. Jaegers do not have a leap ability like Kong does, meaning that in terms of movement, Kong would easily be able to pick these off one by flanking them and taking them out on their weaker sides. The
They could potentially cut them out the air.
would be by teamwork and a clever use of some of their better weapons, such as the arc whip capable of lassoing Kong's appendages, disabling a limb for some time.
Oh, it just, so I was right. I mean, I assumed it was an electric whip that could, you know, disable. So
furthermore, the use of a gravity
and it's a
sling,
longer
a weapon
range.
capable of
They got gravity slings. Shit, I was thinking about the cannon. You have a sling that can control gravity, I would
hurling
assume.
objects at Kong, leveraging centrifugal force. A constant barrage of objects hurled at a distance would potentially weaken this Titan, but
If they're moving buildings, they could just use that sling on Kong.
then again, Kong's ability to throw back these objects would cancel this out, leaving the Jaegers with little to no chance of defeating this Titan. A giant ape
man.
with supernatural leaping abilities, immense strength, dexterity, and intelligence grants the Monsterverse its first win. Though
Okay, so we're just going to assume that Kong is just going to go in, one shot everybody, and he say they try to use the whip on his arm. He's just going to sling that. He's just going to sling they shit without being disabled at all, because electricity running through a physical. He's just a giant ape. I don't recall him having like fucking an atomic body. Like, for example, Shin Godzilla adapts to everything, and his main source of power is fucking, you know, radiation and shit. So I don't think an electric sling is just going to disable him. Not easily. This is a giant ape with muscle and blood tissue. You don't think that'll have an effect on him?
realistically, if any kaiju were to side with humans, it would have been Kong. So in a real-life situation, we would most likely never see this happen. Up
Yeah,
next,
and Kong would be the easiest to beat.
humanity will face a Titan who will voluntarily attack humanity if provoked. Number 2, Jaegers versus the G-Man. After a crushing defeat against Kong, the Jaegers now have to switch their attention to a Titan that, if provoked, could unleash calamity and destruction to all humanity. Godzilla. Now, picking a fight with a massive 390-foot-tall kaiju with atomic weapons will be no easy task, especially since this kaiju is a whopping 99,000 tons, more than 13 times the weight of a single Jaeger, assuming Jaegers were actually that heavy. To put this into weight perspective, this would be the same as a 160-pound person fighting against approximately 13 overweight house cats. Except you're armed with atomic ray weaponry, and they aren't.
They still have weaponry. what's fuck, I don't even remember, man. I ain't watched fucking Godzilla. I mean, I was interested when I was a kid, and then I ain't watch it in years, and then I checked out Shin Godzilla, but didn't finish the movie. I never got into the Legendary series, so I don't know how he is in this shit. I know the Godzilla of Godzilla minus zero was way smaller than the Legendary Godzilla here. But can it be pierced? I know it can tank a nuke. That's the only thing. Shit. Yeah, this one might be a wash.
If you were a Jaeger pilot, you would now have the honor of being able to combat Godzilla in hand-to-hand combat at a larger scale. But you're not alone. Now, how would the Jaegers fare against such odds? To begin, let's bring out some of the most important factors to consider: ranged weaponry, overall strength, and corporal builds.
Nah, fuck that. Durability. You just got, because his arms are smaller. They aren't that big. Unless I'm missing some fucking measurements. But the thing I'm looking at is durability. If you can get past Godzilla's durability. Well, I mean, he could tank a nuke though, because radiation was like his food, his source of power. So that's probably why he was able to take the nuke. If I watch the movie and I see him take, an attack from a piercing weapon, I know Kong's axe cut him. I remember that. If the Jaegers can manage to cut just like Kong's axe can, then all they gotta do is attack him from the legs. I don't think Godzilla could really jump like Kong can. So I had to try to pin him down with the whips, cut the legs,
we have seen the G-Man go up against
and then go for the head.
In 1v1 confrontations, Godzilla proves to be a champion in single-hand combat. But against many foes, Godzilla will struggle a bit more. This time, the G-Man will now face an entire squadron of Jaegers. So the best thing we can do to simulate the outcome is to think like Godzilla. We know this guy has a solid strategic acumen and will try to exploit any advantage he can before engaging in hand-to-hand combat. As Godzilla sees these approaching, he will most likely be met with a barrage of explosive weaponry. In response, Godzilla will deploy atomic breath and will attempt to wipe out as much of the opposing squadron as possible since he's severely outnumbered. Can Godzilla destroy Jaegers at range? Yes. This atomic blast is so powerful that against much lighter opponents, these would literally be sent flying or simply obliterated due to the blast. Once seeing that long-range combat is detrimental, the Jaegers would have to close in and fight Godzilla as one. Which brings us to our next attributes: strength and builds. A 99.
I mean, you can argue it could go either way. If they can manage to cut the legs and just bring him down by subduing him, it could be an easy victory in close quarters. But at full range, he could just one-shot all of them with the atomic breath. I've seen his atomic breath like cut through fucking city blocks. So, yeah. Well, it depends on the type of Godzilla too.
1,000-ton kaiju equipped with extremely strong upper and lower body strength would be able to easily dismantle the smaller Jaegers with ease using its jaws and sharp-tipped claws. But a more devastating weapon against these Jaegers would be its tail. This particular Titan would be more difficult to attack from the rear thanks to this weapon. We have seen this tail in action, sending Kong flying and even executing another Titan.
Well, there's one thing I know from knife combat is that even in the biggest close quarters struggle, you can still get stabbed. Like, and if anything, trying to wrestle somebody with a bladed weapon is the worst thing you could possibly do. Of course, close quarters will be a disadvantage unless he ignites the atomic breath right there while he's grappling. If these Jaegers can cut Godzilla, they could manage to at least stab him up multiple times before you know, he does any move on them. You get what I mean? Like, say he's grabbing the Jaeger and he's trying to like throw it or something. They could get some stabs in before they get launched or before they get grappled.
Much lighter Jaeger hit by the tip of this tail, for instance, would instantly be sliced down the middle. Getting hit in the thicker section would make this Jaeger fair game to get smashed to pieces.
So, like, look at the arm distance. What happened to that? What the fuck is? I don't know the name of these weapons, but you had a bladed weapon that could extend from the wrist. You couldn't like try to cut through the torso. This person's attacking from the tail.
Suffer a solid impact by the.
Instead of dealing with that, you could have went after the open leg. You could have flanked. Like, his tail won't be able to just reach at a full 360 degrees. Unless he just, you know, twirls. But at that point, you could launch ranged weapons on his back. I don't know. The fight is going different in my head.
But will any of these weapons cause serious harm to Godzilla?
That's the question.
Yes, but serious? Not likely. Godzilla's skin is capable of withstanding very high temperatures. Its thick hide helps mitigate deep flesh wounds, and a body so dense that it would be proportionally difficult to penetrate, given that these weapons are very light compared to the G-Man's dense body. Almost.
Well, the thing is, it's like, because these weapons aren't just regular cutting weapons. But then again, it's Godzilla. Like I said, Kong would have been easy. This shit would have been ridiculous.
Like trying to cut through lead with a knife. Although possible, it would take an immense force behind the strike to cut deep. Another challenge is that most of these blades used by these Jaegers are superheated, meaning that if they do cut, these would most likely cauterize the wound, stopping any bleeding. As we can see, bringing down Godzilla at any proximity would be a difficult task even for an entire squadron of Jaegers. Almost impossible without taking heavy losses. Although fighting against Godzilla could be necessary on some occasions, Godzilla doesn't voluntarily attack unless provoked. The final monster on this list will attack without provocation. Number 3, Jaegers versus Mechagodzilla. We
okay,
left this
now
one
we get into
till
the
end
bullshit.
because this confrontation is interesting in different aspects. In many ways, both Jaegers and Mechagodzilla are very similar, both being controlled by a pilot or pilots via neural handshake, or in Mechagodzilla's case, psionic link. Mechagodzilla's pilot would basically have to enter a transitory state in which his brain would intermingle with Mechagodzilla's AI, or more specifically, Ghidorah's consciousness. Both being very trippy processes, but not as trippy as kinda sharing a consciousness with a homicidal, three-headed, bloodthirsty killer. In this scenario, we will have to take into account the mechanical and technological aspect of this battle, or war against Mechagodzilla. The factors to watch out for are ranged weaponry, melee weapons, and psionic infrastructure. We are potentially entering the most brutal of these fights, given that Mechagodzilla is pure evil and is equipped with precisely the type of weaponry to exercise its brutality. Go check out this video to see what we're talking about. But first, let's draw up this scenario. A squadron of Jaegers advances to face off a massive 400-foot-tall Mechagodzilla.
Alright, we got metal on metal action.
Doubles the height of the smaller members of this squadron, equipped with buzzsaw hands, industrial grinder jaws, spinning titanium blade tail, and a lethal proton scream. This battle will be nothing short of devastating. If you didn't know, Mechagodzilla's AI is built to resemble the G-Man's own thought processes, meaning that this standoff would probably resemble the one against Godzilla, with the mech figuring out that it would be better off by killing a good chunk of this squadron at a distance. This gets all the more interesting once this guy gets up and personal with the Jaegers. In terms of physical strength, we see that Mechagodzilla was up to par, if not stronger than a worn-out Godzilla and Kong at the end of GVK. Its supercharged punch was enough to send Godzilla through skylines, and its tail impacts enough to smack Kong to the ground. Jaegers? Easy, except that an evil pair of pilots would humiliate these Jaegers. This animal's strong forelimbs would literally dismember the Jaegers one by one, resisting any missile barrages or impacts inflicted by less dense weapons. But the most devastating weapon of all is its scythed tail. One pierce of these tips is enough to put any of these smaller Jaegers out of commission in seconds. But how would humanity defeat Mechagodzilla? Although it has become clear that beating
They would have to hack it. I'm gonna be blunt. I don't know. Like if it's metal is as strong as Godzilla's hide, whew, that'd be something. That'd be hard to fucking counter. Like, can they cut it? Can their weapons pierce it? If their weapons can pierce it, they can fight it. But if they can't pierce it, their only option would be to try to hack the AI and try to hack the neural link that this pilot has. And it should be easy for, I mean, the Jaegers themselves are powered by a neural link. Like, your mind is connected with the pilot you're with. So knowing that, they should be able to figure out this Mechagodzilla. If they, get close enough to figure that shit out, of course.
Is almost impossible. We must remember that Mechagodzilla was also human built, and that there are also other forces at play here. No, not like this though. Up in the heights of outer space, there is supposedly a satellite which transmits psionic signals or commands back down to the mech. This network allows the pilot and Ghidorah to control the mech remotely without them having to be housed inside the mech itself, meaning that a well-targeted missile strike to any of these two locations would cause necessary disruptions for this thing to lose contact, lag, or even shut the whole thing down. Jaegers fortunately don't require a satellite uplink to relay commands, which is their most important edge against this particular mech. But shutting down Mechagodzilla is not guaranteed. On the contrary, if this network's architecture was built in such a way that it allowed it to go rogue instead of shutting down, humanity would have instigated an even bigger problem by having to deal with Ghidorah's consciousness as the one and only pilot of this killing machine. Do you think humanity can stand a chance against any of these kaiju? How do you think Jaegers would fare against some non-alpha titans in the Monsterverse? Hit that subscribe button and follow us for more content on your favorite monsters, kaiju, and more.
Yeah, it's when they get to Godzilla, I think it's going to be a problem. Well, like I said, they managed to subdue him, duck the fucking hyper beam, the atomic beam, atomic breath, whatever you want to call it. Find a way to duck that shit and cut it at the legs. They'll be able to do it. They just have to subdue them and use those whips. Use those gravity spheres. Or those gravity they call them shits. You know what I'm talking about, bro. Use that shit, find a way to subdue him. Cut the legs off, cut the head off. I know I'm making it sound way easier than it actually be. But it is what it is. Mechagodzilla, I don't even know if their weapons could even pierce that shit. Their best bet is to destroy the neural link or straight up just hack the shit, because any type of technology can be hacked, especially with the advanced shit that they got. It should be easy for them to understand how Mechagodzilla works. But anyway, it's just me talking shit. I hope you enjoyed it.